I'm Chase Hansen, and this is my presentation for the final project of Art History 3250. I curated my exhibition on Shoji Hamada and his art done in the turn of the century period. Um, my kind of initial idea, what I was thinking of was from the very beginning, I wanted to do this in Amoka. I was very much thinking of that kind of significance that the American Museum of Ceramic Art here has um, to kind of local potters, to people who want to study pottery or to practice it, and how it kind of is that liminal space there. And at the same time, I was kind of thinking of the way that Orientalist narrative plays into the way we conceive historiographically of the entire folk pottery movement at that time. How we have this kind of narrative of Bernard Leach going to Japan, discovering this tradition there, bringing it to the rest of the world, and then the world then discovers it through him. And that barely makes sense in context. Um, I'm not saying that Bernard Leach is irrelevant or that he accomplished nothing. I'm not saying that he didn't have a relationship with people he had relationships with in the art scene. But even in my sources alone, like there's a lot of aspersion. Nobody could really pin down for sure what level of contact Leach even had with the people that he's seen as representing. Um, from everything that I've read, he had contact with a very small number of relatively elite practiced artists, and he didn't have a lot of great interactions with actual folk artists. So when he's then seen as bringing the art from those folk artists to the rest of the world, there's a lot of disconnect there between the story and reality. And so I was thinking of these liminal spaces in pottery tradition, in folk pottery tradition, in Hamada's work alone, kind of thinking of how those liminal spaces are erased and ignored by that narrative. And so I kind of wrapped all those things together into one liminal exhibition. And that's even reflected in the room. So you can see the Blender model that I used to mock this up here. Um, the room that I was thinking of in Amoka is the building is a converted bank. It literally has a huge vault door in the middle of an exhibition space, and there's this tiny little room, the old vault behind there, that bridges the exhibition hall to the gift shop. And it kind of fluxes between them both. Sometimes it's an extension of the gift shop, sometimes it's its own little tiny exhibition space, and sometimes it's an extension of the larger exhibition hall. Um, and that fitted right into everything. So I kind of modeled it after. The more I think about it, the more I think this I might have this room flipped or mirrored the wrong way. Um, so I kind of modeled that little room and built up just like I've seen actual exhibitions do. They have these kind of chest height, around 50 inches tall shelves, and they'll space them out evenly and put works on them. So this is very similar to the way that actual curators do handle the space, from what I understand. Um, I was kind of limited on finding work. I'm not my the curation that I did isn't quite as like well researched and measured out as a lot of other students that I've seen. It's a little harder to do a random vase than it is to do, say, a painting done by a contemporary artist who has interviews done it on it. That there's a lot of visual formal analysis you can do of the painting. So I don't have a ton in the way of didactics regarding the pieces themselves because I don't know how much I could elucidate on this. Oh, okay. I don't know how much I could elucidate on. This is a Ripley plate. Um, I don't know if like I could do a technical analysis of it of the glazes used, but I don't think that would be incredibly relevant to the exhibition at hand. Um, so as I imagine that these would have labels probably on the wall next to them. These I have these kind of boxes that are representing the objects because obviously I don't have real objects. This is just a mock-up. These are just placeholders with the little images stretched across it. So I found these works through that website. I believe it was called ArtNet. That has a library of hundreds and hundreds of Hamada's work. Um, and it's not quite as simple as just saying this is Hamada's work, because as it turns out, he, out of a kind of humility, I guess you can call it, not wanting to tout himself up as that Rembrandt signature on a piece, he didn't sign the actual vessels, although he would sign, dedicate, and maybe write something on the boxes that the vessels were contained in. So you see things like this where this is the intended label, this is the intended didactic alongside it. Although didactic is a strong word in this case, as he's kind of riding the line between something that's supposed to be used folk pottery and something that's fine art, and he was well aware of his place there, that he didn't want to be the rich and powerful fine artist. He wanted to be something more riding the line in keeping with that liminal conception of his work. The pieces I chose, as you can see, are in themselves liminal. Apart from using this bottle as like a sake bottle, there's not a ton you would do with it. You don't see that and go, that's something I need in my daily life. So a lot of these are kind of oddly shaped, almost decorational bottles. This is a egg holder or something like that. These kind of objects that don't neatly fit into, for these plates, because of the fashion in which their surface decorated. From what I can tell, this is all unglazed, which means it's semi-porous. It probably is going to harbor bacteria. You can't clean it that easily. You don't really want to eat off that. So while it is a plate, and it technically is a functional plate, you don't really want to use it more than a couple times. It's a little gross. And so it makes you stop and it makes you ask, what is the place for this plate? How do we look at it? How do we think about it? How do we view it? Where do we put it in our schema and in our worlds? And yeah, that's kind of my exhibition. It draws heavily on the Said text, although I'm not necessarily the strongest fanatical believer in the Said text. Um, in 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 research for this alone, I found writers who were kind of going against Said, who were specifically calling him out and saying that this doesn't neatly fit into the Said Orientalist modes of philosophy of thinking about the way that these narratives unfold. Because it wasn't necessarily a simple narrative of Leech goes there and brings stuff back. Japan had its own folk pottery scene that in itself was revitalized by this, that in itself kind of built on what potters like Shoji Hamada were doing at the time. There's a lot of complexity there, and it's probably something that I could write a book about if I got too deep into it, and I found people who did write books about this. Um, and yeah, I believe that's my exhibition. Thank you very much.